Eddie's on fire. We're live. Thank you all for joining this Social Work Race podcast. Listen, behind the scenes there is fire. We had a few technical difficulties, but we are here. You know, my streaming, my internet service wants to play around with me today, but
Babylon.
you know, the system, what's going on behind the scenes, you know, they're trying to stop us.
Yes,
tongue-in-cheek people, welcome to the platform. You know, this is the podcast site that talks all things social work, frontline workers. This is for you. Social work students, this is for you. We have a lot of learning from this session, and this session will be broken up into a few pieces, I can see, because I have one of the greatest, you know, orators and thinkers of our time. You know, and I mean that. Listen, I don't say what I don't mean. You know, I like to put everybody in the same band bracket, but it's not always the case. And Eddie and I have done quite a bit of work over the years in collaboration. And when it comes to racism, diversity, although I want everyone's views, I want you all to know that for me personally, it's a personal thing where Eddie is able to articulate, and that's the thing, we're able to articulate sometimes even the thoughts of people who haven't even fully processed it, but it's there. And so I am so much more a learner today to be on this show. And I want you to understand that we do this so that we can create a new space for people to understand themselves. We're talking about diversity and racism today. We are not looking at this through necessarily a Black Power or Black Lives Matter lens. We're looking at this actually just through Eddie's eyes and through his professional perspective. This show is to educate both anyone who is non-white, and whatever that means, and Black, whatever that means. Eddie will probably break it down. I've always been about not saying, I don't like using the term Black sometimes because it's a diverse word and it means different things to different people. But here we are, we're using the word Black. And this is a learning resource, especially for those out there who are like managers or students, teachers, tutors. You're going to learn today because we have someone who can tell you really more about how you need to consider what this is all about and how to manage it in our institutions. So Eddie, I'm just going to let you introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for no pressure, Kurt, no pressure. Thank you for having me in this space with you. My name is Eddie Hypolite. I'm a Londoner born and bred. I'm living in Australia now. Been here the past 9 years. I am a trained theologian and a sociologist. Those are my two academic backgrounds, so theology and sociology. Prior to being a pastor, which I was for 16 years, I was a residential social worker and then a youth worker before that. Growing up in West London, I'm born in Fulham. So my life has always been within the space, I suppose, of spirituality, has been within the space of activism, has been within the space of redefining historical narrative, realigning myself to a narrative of my discovery and not a narrative of implementation, you know, growing up in England. And so I find myself now in the space of consultancy, the past 5 years, helping organizations and helping individuals realign themselves to healthy narratives that build resilience, that build good cultures of leadership. And that helped to help to think again about this construct
Mm,
of systemic racism and what systemic racism does to us as human beings. Um, First of all, as human beings, and then within our polarized spaces of black and white, and then all shades in between.
mm,
Uh,
mm. Yeah.
so yeah, that's where I find myself now, helping. I like to describe it as helping stuck people unstick themselves,
Mm,
and helping others just realize where they are, understand the narratives that define them, and define the way they think about other people and the way in which they relate to other people, give them understanding of why people relate to them in the way they do. Um,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
that's see, that's why I called you, right? You know, we can't unsing it, man. We can't unsing it. It is what it is. But you know, let's just kind of off the bat,
Mhm,
this, hmm, and probably more so because of where you live now.
mhm,
But I think it's still the case here. This is naturally going to be an uncomfortable conversation.
mhm,
And the question I have for you is, does it need to be an uncomfortable conversation? And we're speaking as professionals. Um, yeah.
I think it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation depending on where you position yourself in the conversation. 2020, my daughter is in year 11, and she obviously she's at a pretty much 95% white school where we live in New South Wales.
Mm.
The school is having conversations around racism as best they can,
As a result of what? What was the need
as
for
a
it?
result of the murder of George Floyd and
Mm,
the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, they went through here in Australia what the rest of the global planet went through. You know, in light of the murder, and then the marches and the protests,
mm,
etc. I went into the school and I asked her head teacher what she was doing to facilitate conversations amongst the students. Amongst the staff. You know, um, her reply was to assure me that they are encouraging the students to read and to, enlighten themselves. I reminded her that this is a school. And in a school, the onus should never be on the students to inform and educate themselves. The onus has to be on the teachers, you know, because I asked her specifically, I'm not talking to you about the students, miss. I'm actually talking to you about the staff. Conversations are being had amongst the staff? And her reply is something I've spoken about quite a lot since then. Her reply was, well, we are trying to have the conversation in such a way that people don't feel uncomfortable.
mm,
My
mm,
response was, well, miss, there is no comfortable way to have an uncomfortable conversation.
mm,
But the uncomfort, the discomfort will be mitigated when the conversation is had with honesty, it's had with humility, it's had with empathy, it's had with professionalism, and it's had with a commitment to real change. But there ain't no way of escaping the discomfort. I left that with her. Nothing was done about it. So, in answer to your question, is there any way of is there any way of avoiding the discomfort? It depends on the position that you come from. If you come from a place of a defensive position when discussing systemic racism, um, as a white person, let's start with a white person. If you come from a place of defensiveness, it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation. Number one, it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation anyway, because you're talking about histories that you had no part in creating, but historically you've benefited from. You've
mm,
benefited from, you may not benefit from the wealth that has been
mm,
passed down, but
mhm,
you benefit from the privilege that has
mhm,
passed down, just in terms of the way in which you navigate the world and the
mm,
way in which any type of barriers that you experience, you don't experience due to your skin. You may
mm,
experience due to hardship, you may experience, due to economic turn down, you may experience, due to, a lack of resource, but it's never going to be to your skin color, So that's what you benefit from. So if you come into a conversation, you see a conversation about systemic racism, number one is a conversation. It's the same conversation that Morpheus had with Neo in the Matrix.
Yeah.
Neo weren't in a position to discuss the Matrix because he was living within the Matrix. Systemic racism is the Matrix.
He just woke up to the fact.
Yeah, he was, Neo, and Morpheus was saying, you want to have a conversation with me, you got to take the pills.
Yeah.
You got to take the pills so you can see the world as it is, so you know how to navigate the world. This is the one conversation that a white person cannot come into from a place of seeking to take control of the situation. You can't take control of a situation you don't understand, because the control that you're trying to take continues to be over this person's life, this person's perception, this person's reality, and the reality that systemic racism has created from them. If you come from a place of constant defensiveness as a Black person, you're going to miss the beauty of your own story. You're going to miss the beauty in your struggle.
Are you talking about, how can I say this? Are you talking about when a Black person comes to the table to have the discussion? But
when a Black person comes to this table to have the discussion with a white person, if all
and maybe they're filled with maybe a level of anger, frustration,
rage, justifiable rage, justifiable rage.
We can't. You're saying that that's not the way to approach the conversation.
I'm saying you cannot approach it. I'm saying you cannot approach it. You know what I mean? Because systemic racism as an idea, systemic racism as a construct has already pitted us against each other. So that, systemic racism, it prevents a white person from seeing a Black humanity. And systemic racism also prevents a Black person from seeing a white person's real desire to be empathetic. It prevents a Black person from hearing a white person when they turn around and say, I don't know how to show me. I'm honestly trying to, as it were, break away from this matrix that prevents me from seeing you as a human being and seeing your struggle and seeing the way the world is set up, from understanding why when I walk into a building with you, I will walk in and security doesn't say nothing to me. And although they call you sir, they will still ask, can I help you, sir? The inference being, well, he looks like he belongs, but can I help you? Why are you here? You know what I mean? The white person needs to understand why is it? And so if the Black person comes from the place of charm, me I go burn down Babylon, me have to burn down, or whichever way you say it. And a white person comes from the position of, well, it was a long time ago, and I don't see color. Yeah, that's going to be a very, very uncomfortable conversation.
And it's interesting.
You won't be able to have the conversation.
It's interesting you say that, because I think that if we stop, and I'm pointing to the white person here, but also the Black, but also the white. And when someone says, "I'm gonna burn down Babylon," what are they actually saying?
They're saying the same thing that Pink Floyd said. All in all, it's just another brick in the wall. Pink Floyd said, we're breaking down this whole system because all of these things that we don't need no education, we don't need no force control. Saying the same thing that Pink Floyd said, but just with a Caribbean accent. We're breaking down all these systems. We're breaking down all these systems that divide. Babylon, when a Black person says that, I'm going to burn down Babylon, they're saying, all in all, it's never brick in the wall. They're literally saying the same things, which gets you to understand that we are fighting to a large degree and to varying degrees the same struggles, but from different spaces. We're fighting the same struggles but from different spaces, or similar struggles, I should say. I should say the same struggles. We're fighting similar struggles for freedom, for understanding who we are as human beings, of living outside of systems that hem us in, and give us menus that are already pre-cooked. We want to come to the table with our own food, and the menu says, no, the only thing you can eat is this. I'm like, well, can I bring my food to the table? I mean, like, no, this is the only menu. And so any conversation about race, there's no way of avoiding how uncomfortable the conversation is going to be. But that conversation can be mitigated when you come with just humility. It has to be you know what I mean? It has to, on the part of white people, I'm going to say it has to be had with humility. On Black people, it has to be had with patience. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because the one thing that systemic racism has done is rob both of us of our humanity. Systemic racism is a narrative. Remember, systemic racism as a construct is based on an idea of race. There is nothing sociological, anthropological, scientific that affirms the idea that there is a difference between a person of Black skin and a person of white skin. That somehow they are genetically, anthropologically, they are socially, no, one is inferior to the other. And so what systemic racism as a construct does, not as an idea. Well, the idea says that you're different, but it's not based on anything. But now the construct, which is complex, and the construct, which is deep, and just like a bottomless pit, the more you engage it. What the construct does at its fundamental level is rob both of us of our humanity.
What do you mean?
It robs us of our humanity because it refuses to allow us to see ourselves as we actually are. Systemic racism, and the idea of race is a new invention. It's a new invention. There's always been the idea of nationality. If you was a Roman, you felt that you was greater than anybody else in the whole known world, but that was because you was a Roman. I mean, that wasn't based on color. That was based on the fact that you was a Roman. So there were African Romans, and there were Mediterranean Romans. They weren't European. There weren't any European Caesars. You know what I mean? There weren't no European. They
but the nationality.
But in terms of nationality, so what systemic racism did, which is about 500 years old, 500, 600 years old, it introduced this idea. And it introduced the idea in order to justify the enslavement of Black people. Remember, it was capitalism, really, that invented systemic racism. That invented the idea of race as a justification for the enslavement of African bodies. But what systemic racism did in Europe was lie first to white people about who they are. You know what I mean? It lied to white people. You know what I mean? And it lied about Black people. There's a difference. It lied to white people and said that you are superior to these people. You know, and you are superior to these people. And then, of course, they use pseudoscience, they use false religion, and all the rest of it in order to justify that. But when they came into places where Black and brown people lived and saw our histories, and saw that our histories predate everything, you know what I mean? And they saw the contribution of African history to the building, and they saw the contribution of African history to the building of European civilization, and Kemet to the building of Greek and the Hellenistic world, and Socrates and Hippocrates and all of them studying at the universities of Kemet. When they saw all of that, what they did was lie about Black people. So first of all, it lies two white people robbing them of their humanity and an understanding of who they are in the human story. And then it lies about black people of African descent, robbing them of their humanity and their place in the human story. And so systemic racism as a narrative, what it does is it robs all of us of our humanity.
And talk to me, talk a little bit about the humanity element. What are we losing as a result of this? Because it's both sides.
What we're losing is our understanding of where we are in the human story and who we are in the human story. You know, for black people, for instance, you know, let's take the education system. Let's just take the education system for one. You know, it creates this idea that black people have no history outside of Europe coming to their history. You know, so black history is taught in school from the perspective of slavery and colonialism. That's where we start. You know what I mean? European history, you know, Britain, take for instance, British history. You know, one of my professors at Goldsmith said, you know, the problem with British history is that most of it has taken place abroad. You know what I mean? So you got the ancient British history, you know, which is, you know, Cromwell and Battle of Hastings, Cromwell, and you know the struggle to have a parliamentary system. Henry VIII coming and the struggle against you know Protestants and Catholics, etc. But the moment England starts to expand and become an empire, Britain's modern history, Britain's history, the past 400 years in the rest of the in the rest of the world has taken place abroad. It's taken place abroad, and so. There hasn't been a chance for people to truly understand. And so from the perspective of education, black children are robbed of their humanity because they are not seeing they are not seeing their contribution to the building of Western civilization. They're not seeing the fact that you are actually, as Africans, you are the fathers of math, and you are the fathers of science, and you are the fathers of astronomy. You know, you were already navigating the planet without maps. Everywhere we've been on the planet, we've seen that you were there. Everywhere Europeans went and said, we've discovered this place. No, what they discovered was that Africans were there before them, you know. So young black children, you know, young brown children are not seeing their contribution to the story of humanity. Young white children are seeing a false story of their contribution to humanity. You know, or they're seeing a limited story. So they're constantly looking at these black children like they need our help. No, they don't need your help. They don't come from a history where they've needed your help. They come from a history where agency was taken from them and your help was forced on them. But they don't come from a history of, you know, they don't come from a history of prior to the interruption. You know, of systemic.
Oh, sorry. Let's pause.
Yeah.
Let's pause. Sorry. Can you see me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. It's back now. So carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. They don't come from a history prior to the interruption of transatlantic slavery. There again, you know, in school, transatlantic slavery is taught as African history. Transatlantic slavery is not African history. Transatlantic slavery is European history. Transatlantic slavery is an interruption of African history. That's what it is.
Do you know what?
Interruption of African history. And so that's where I'm talking about in terms of people seeing their humanity. Our humanity is stored in narrative. That's where our humanity is stored. Our identity, our humanity, our history, our sense of who we are, our sense of belonging, all of these things are stored in narrative. And if young black children don't have an understanding of what that narrative is, and young white children don't have an understanding of what that narrative is, essentially they're robbed of their humanity, and they're robbed of the ability to see the humanity, to see equal humanity in another child, in another individual.
Do you know what? I now am more understanding of what you mean when you say this is an uncomfortable conversation.
It is. It
And
is.
and with that, are we trying to put down white folk? Are we trying to
No,
tip the scales? What
man.
are you trying to do with this?
What I'm trying to do is say, listen, bruh, we've both been lied to here. I've been lied about. You've been lied to.
Mm.
I've been lied about. You've been lied to. You know what I mean? When I remember when I was in secondary school, I went to Holland Park, and I was funny enough, I dreamt about Holland Park last night. Kurt.
Actually, we were there on the weekend. Funny enough.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we were there on the weekend. Yeah.
I dreamt about Holland Park last night. I dreamt I was in school and I was walking down the staircase, familiar staircase, and that everything felt so familiar. When I was in Holland Park, I wasn't a bad kid. I just was inner. And for those who don't know what inner means, it's just mischievous. Anytime there's drama, Eddie's in it. Anytime there's hype, Eddie's in it. Anytime, you know what I mean, things are kicking off, Eddie's somewhere around it. Just inner. Anyway,
My
in the
Wi-Fi.
end, I remember going to an educational psychologist with my mom. Never forget it.
Sorry, Eddie. Oh man, Wi-Fi. 1 second. Are we back?
We're back. We're back.
You saying? See, here we go. Pause. I want to get that back when we come back. When we come back, come on, Wi-Fi. Be good to me. Be good to me. They're doing work. I told you they're doing works, and it's just only on the days when I want to perform do they want to do this work. You were inner. You were.
Yeah, I was inner. And for those who don't know what inner means, it's a Caribbean, mainly Jamaican colloquialism, and it just basically means you're just mischievous. Anytime there's trouble, Eddie's in it. Anytime there's hype, Eddie's in it. Anytime there's drama, look around, Eddie's somewhere there. And I was just inner. And and I remember, I can still hear you though. I can still hear you.
Okay, cool.
You know what I mean? I can still hear you. But I remember going to an educational psychologist. Never forget it. Remember where it was? Fulham Palace Road. You know what I mean? Remember where the building was and everything. Sat in front of this educational psychologist. Educational psychologist said, Mrs. Hypolite, the problem with Eddie is that he's uneducatable. Yeah, said that to me, said that about me around about 79. What I didn't know, I learned historically, is that term uneducatable was a term that was being hung around the neck of young Black Caribbean boys, first generation like myself, and young white Irish boys, all of us from West London. You know what I mean? All of the young Irish boys from Kilburn and all Willesden and Neasden and all that. And using that statement, we were weeded out of the educational system because it created a narrative around us. That was given to me in year 9, in my 3rd year, just as I entered year 9. I lasted about 7 weeks of year 9. Then I was permanently excluded from school. I ended up in a community homeschool all the way out in Essex. It was a vocational school, so you never got an education there. You got a trade. You did basic English and math, but you got a trade. So I went into the engineering workshop of a man called Cliff German, Mr. German, Cliff German. And he was the one that first tapped into my capacity to absorb information. I was told I was uneducatable. He gave me a piece of work to do in the engineering workshop. I did it in about 15 minutes. I went to him. I said, sir, I'm finished. He said, no, you can't be finished yet. There's a bit of welding work. I said, no, sir, honestly, I'll finish. He said, all right, let's have a look. Went into the welding booth. He looked at the work and he was like, bloody hell, you have finished it. And then he looked at me and he went, all right. And then he gave me a piece of work that did last me the whole of the morning. You know what I mean? Gave me a piece of work after that did last me the morning. But what he did, and I realized in retrospect, as I think back on those years, he realized that I was very much educatable. As a matter of fact, I had a high capacity for information, high capacity to absorb information, to understand it, and to feed it back and do high quality work. So instead of giving me less to do, he actually gave me more than other students to do because he understood how my brain worked. Now the prevailing...
bear with me. You know what I'm going to...
Oh yeah, it's cutting out now.
Are we back? Sorry about that. I just rebooted the Wi-Fi, so
Oh,
let's
but that reboot, quick bridging.
on the laptop. Let's hope, because I
All
am
right.
not switching it off right now because it'll be 10 minutes before it comes back on. But
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
he recognized that he had a high capacity for learning.
He recognized I had a high capacity for learning. And what he
Mm,
did was tap into that high capacity for learning. He tapped into it and he brought it out. You know, I credit him as being the first teacher. I've been influenced by 4 educators in my lifetime. You know what I mean? And he is one of the 4. You know what I mean? Him being the person who tapped into my capacity for learning. Barbara Bees, who was one of the Mangrove 9, um, who I met on a YUP scheme. And she was in charge of education. And she introduced me to literature. She introduced me to Malcolm X and Luther King and Soul on Ice and the Soledad Brothers and H. Rap Brown, Afrocentricity, Afrocentrism, Pan-Africanism, I should say. And she introduced me to the joy of reading, you know. Then the next one was a professor that I met at Northern Caribbean University in Jamaica called Dr. Olive Hemmings. Lord of mercy. Hands down, one of the most powerful, brilliant theological minds and sociological minds. She was just, she was phenomenal. Had a massive impact on me. And then the last one being Dr. Eric Henry, who was a pastoral and a theological mentor for me and guided me in my formative years, working in Kennington and working in South London. So, going all the way back to the idea of narrative, the prevailing narrative for me as a young Black Caribbean boy and young white Irish boys was that we were uneducatable. But those were narratives that were fed into our journeys. And so that's where it begins. It robbed us of our humanity. And, fortunately, even though I ended up in a place academically that didn't give me academics, gave me a trade, I actually ended up in the workshop of a teacher. And I left the school, and then I stayed in contact with him. I stayed in contact with him up until when he died, about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, about 12, 13 years ago now. He stayed in my life. He stayed in my life. Our relationship remained. But systemic racism, like I said, it robs us. What it does is it robs us. It robs us of our humanity. It robs us of the ability to see and understand our humanity. And that's what we have to rescue. We have to rescue ourselves from, and we have to rescue our children from. We have to rescue our children from that.
I wanted to speak to something here, because when you've brought up that, you're about maybe 10 years older than me or something like that.
Yeah.
It has to be still alive. Now, so a lot of people I work with are pretty much younger than me.
Yeah.
Okay. 5 years onwards, younger than me. So 10 years, I remember growing up in the 90s, which is where I saw racism with my own eyes. I could conceive it when I was in college. Well, in school, secondary school in the 80s, but then I really felt it in the 90s. I went to Brixton College, and there was a lot of tension in the early 90s because of a few deaths that had taken place under the hand of the police, and there was riots taking place in Tottenham and so forth. And so I can remember some of the tensions, the extreme tensions that existed. Your age group is still very much alive and kicking. And although you would be considered more uncle level to me, your age group is in a lot of the social institutions, whether it be colleges and social services. And you all pretty much have, in my opinion, have experienced the same or quite similar things. And because of that, yours narrative is very much alive, but probably unspoken, which is where George Floyd comes in to the situation, because George Floyd then really called for institutions to ask questions and then have an uncomfortable conversation with the people that have experienced all of this. So here you are. You're opening up this topic now, and I want you to kind of drive it towards management, professionals. What do we have to do then as managers, as white managers? How are they going to approach the topic? This is going to be now part 2 of this podcast. How are managers now going to approach this topic appropriately as a result of George Floyd? Seeing as you've brought us into the whole, this uncomfortable, you've made me uncomfortable because I have white friends. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want people to feel uncomfortable around me, but you've made me feel uncomfortable with this conversation. That has been playing out in my head since I was a child. So how is now management now going to address this appropriately?
I think management has to, number one, management has to, number one, not ignore the fact that while they may be addressing it in the workplace, they may not be actually addressing it in their personal lives, lived space. You know, I think most people engage, my experience has been most people who engage in the DEI talks that we have in the workplace, and you know, a lot of you know, there are some, you know, actually too many who are engaging it just to figure out how they can navigate at work and not be racist, but go home with their racist views. You know, you know, how they actually feel and what they actually believe, you know, get them in their space when they're at their pub or they're at their cafe or at their wine bar or at the weekend when they're with their mates, then you will actually know what they believe and how they feel and what's on their mind. And so I think that that's where it has to be addressed first. Not once you're amongst Black people, but actually once you're amongst your own fellow white people. And the pushback from that for them, I understand, is difficult. You know, I've had the conversation time and time again, where they, you know, white people will say to me, white friends will say to me, you know, the pushback isn't at work, Ed. The pushback is when I'm amongst my own family and my own friends, you know what I mean? And people within my own lived space. That's where I see it, you know. I think also from the point of view of management has to stop coming up with a song and dance about what Black people need and just sit down and hear the journey. You know what I mean? And hear the journey, because we do understand that we do understand that you are trying to plug a hole. You're trying to plug a hole with a sieve. You're trying to collect water with a sieve. You know what I mean? Because while we may plug the gap here in the workplace, once we leave outside the workplace, there is a whole other structural gap that isn't being plugged. You know, you see that with the prevailing Conservative Party. You see that with their policies. You see that with their policies.
You're still following UK politics, right?
Of course, you see that with their policies on policing. You see that with their policies on housing. You see that with their policies on education. It's just right across the book. It's right across the board. And in Western Europe, as also in America, there's a kind of far right extremism that's just brought it to the surface. Now, people will turn around and say, well, you got people like, what's his name? Sunak. You got people like Sunak, and you got all of these other people who are in the Conservative Party. What are you saying, that they're racist too? I'm not. Yeah. They're participating in the construct. You know what I mean? For them, it's what I call the problem of proximity. It's the problem of proximity and power. What for them? With them, he is distancing himself. Take, for instance, Rishi Sunak. He's distancing himself from the history that brought him to England as an immigrant, that brought his parents to England as immigrants. He's distancing himself from that, and then, you know what I mean, endorsing policies that will plug that hole, so no one else with it from his background can come through. And that's the problem of proximity. That's the problem of a narrative that says, if you can get as close to us, so if you can get as close to us, you'll be good. So I think for managers, managers who are in that space and who are dealing with people from Black and brown, from African and from Caribbean and from Asian, and every other, you see, it becomes so hierarchical. it's hierarchical. What did Common say in his album? The color of my skin, they're comparing it to sin. The darker it gets, the less fair it has been. And so I think managers have to stop coming to the table, with the perspective of, we are going to help you. No, you're not going to help me. What we're going to do is help you help yourself. We don't need actual help. We need you to be conscious of who you are and how that affects us. We don't need your help. We need you to be conscious. We need you to be self-aware. So when we sit down and talk to you and tell you about what's taking place in this space, you can be self-aware, so that you're self-aware of our journey. You're self-aware of the narratives that are prevailing, that mean that certain people are getting promotions, certain people are getting mentored, certain people are getting looked at, and certain people are getting looked over. And not because of the cheap excuse of so-called unconscious bias, which is foolishness. It's implicit bias. It's unexplored bias. It's unexamined bias.
Is that a word to soften the blow? A term to soften the blow?
Yeah. Unconscious is actually the escape hatch word, so that you don't take responsibility. But it's implicit. It's unexamined. It's unexplored. So I think from the perspective of managers, they have to actually look at. They go to the data. As managers, just go to the data. The data will tell you the story. Go to the data and look at who's being promoted and who's not being promoted. Go to the data and find out who's in the upper echelons of leadership that are making decisions for the social workers that are coming behind them. You know what I mean? At a table of decisions that have been made about Black people, who are the Black people and Black and brown people, you know what I mean, that you have at that table? In the places where decisions have been made about women, who are the women that you have in there, that understand the narrative, that understand the struggle, that understand the history, that are making decisions about women, And so that's where you start, It's about understanding that not all the answers are going to come from you. And you shouldn't expect them to come from you. If you're a manager and you're a leader of people, the answers come collectively. Your job isn't to have all the answers. Your job is to harness all the wisdom in the room so that the answer can be distilled. That's your job.
Yeah,
that's what leaders do. Leaders don't sit down there to come up with all the answers. What are you trying to do? You're making a rod for your back. Pull all the heads together, and in all, there's an old proverb that says, in the multitude of counsel, wisdom is established.
Yeah.
or wisdom is distilled. So I think for managers, number one, don't come from number one, check yourself, check your own stories, check your own narratives, check where you are outside of the workplace, not inside of the workplace, because everyone can walk carefully with inside the workplace. There's policies, there's policies and there's practices that govern who you are. But when you leave out of the workplace and you're going home, so number one, check that place. Number two, don't come to the table like you're trying to come to fix us and help us. We don't need your help. What we need you to be is fully aware of who you are and where you are in relation to us. We know how to help ourselves. We need you to just be aware, and we need you to come to the table with humility when you listen to our stories. We're not coming for a handout. We're not coming for you to feel sorry. We're none of that. Just take a moment to hear, take a moment to listen, and so that you can make better informed decisions. You can make better informed decisions about leadership and about who you are as a leader. Because the construct continues. The construct ain't going nowhere. The reason why systemic racism isn't going nowhere is because capitalism as the prevailing ideal of the West isn't going anywhere.
Well, you know what? That leads into my question. I have two more questions for you. Who knows if they're going to be more, but I have two questions for you. Is systemic racism about evil white folk?
No, it's about lied to humans. Oh, I like that one. I really do like that one. That one just came to me. No, systemic racism isn't about evil white people. It's about lied to humans. Remember I told you, when white people came up with the idea of systemic racism, who did they sell it to first? They had to sell it to Europeans.
Yeah.
When they invented it in Portugal, you know what I mean? And then they perfected it all the way through Europe. They sold it to white people. You know what I mean? In America, they perfected it. Europe was the old world. America was the new world. And in the new world, they came with the old sickness. But they perfected the old sickness to the point where they told white people, poor white people, no matter how poor you are and how rich that black person is, you know what I mean? They are still less than you because they're black, because they're the N-word. Because think about that. Think about that. So you could be a poor white redneck farmer who can only speak in 2-syllable words, and this could be a Morehouse, this could be a Howard, a Tusk, a Brown, a Huey, educated black man or black woman, and they ain't nothing. Hey, systemic racism is about lie to human beings. That's what it is. You know what I mean? And they sold it first in Europe to white people. And then they went in the rest of the world and lied to everybody. Once they stole their land and they stole their bodies, they lied to them they lied about them to the rest of the world. So African history begins with white people, blessing us with slavery. You know what I mean? Australia isn't discovered until white people land there. When Australia has a history that's 60,000 years old with First Nation people, intricate, complex, beautiful history.
So
America. I mean, you go.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No. I was going to say, because you mentioned that that capitalism is probably a part of the system, which is what systemic racism is about now. I mean, why did you bring that up?
Well, capitalism.
Because it's in the context of, well, it's not necessarily evil white folks sitting at the top rubbing their hands and saying, let's keep them where they are. It might be, I don't know, but you mentioned capitalism.
Well, capitalism is the Western. Capitalism is the Western. And before anybody starts saying, "Oh, right, he's just a left, he's woke," please get over yourself, please. Crying out loud, they're just, these are all just ideologies. Stop it. Capitalism is the prevailing ideology.
We know that.
It's the pervading world ideology. Socialism came in for a bit, with Russia and the USSR, but then it collapsed. Why did it collapse? Because the one thing that socialism never took into consideration was human selfishness.
Yeah.
And human greed, and so in the end it collapsed.
It wins.
And now what do you have? You have the oligarchs that you have now, and so I say capitalism simply because capitalism was the way it was through capital, the expansion of capitalism, that Europe built its wealth. Europe built its wealth by going into other countries and stealing their land and stealing their wealth and stealing their histories and stealing their art. That's how Europe built its wealth. This isn't me being woke. This is me just picking up any type of history book you can think of. Capitalism did that. It was capitalism that did that, which was blessed by Christianity, you know what I mean? Which was affirmed in universities and colleges, sociologically, anthropologically, psychologically. It was affirmed in all of those type of things. They came up with theologies in order to confirm it through the Christian church. Capitalism was the way in which the West built its wealth. In order to justify that, they had to come up with an idea of the division of the races in order to justify stealing. So it's like, well, we took the land from that person because, well, they're like children, aren't they? And so we're going in there to just like help them. That it's literally that. It's literally that. You know what I mean? Because look at our inventions. Look at our civilization. We are a great civilization. They are people without civilization. And so capitalism created systemic racism and the idea of race in order to steal the planet. And then it maintained it in order to maintain the stealing of the planet. To this very day, the British Museum won't give back the Benin bronzes. Why? Because they said, well, we don't feel that they will be safe there. Think about it. You steal from a man. I mean, they were safe before you stole them, weren't they? How long were they there safe before you went and stole them? You steal from a man, and then the man says, "Can I have my things back, please?" And they said, like, no. We don't think it would be safe. Safe from who? The only person that stole it was you. So can we have it so that we can keep it safer so that you don't steal it again? That's a narrative. That's a continued narrative. That's a continued narrative of the inferiority of these people and the need of those people to continue to be ruled, and their art to continue to be ruled. And so I'll say I believe that where we start is with the place of narrative. But to your question, and sorry, I feel like I'm rambling now. To your question, as long as systemic racism, as long as capitalism exists, systemic racism will exist. As long as one exists, the other's gonna exist. Because what does capitalism do? Capitalism puts the blame on everyone. Well, it's all these foreigners coming over here to steal our jobs. No, it's the government that's changing policies on you, and and then putting the blame on somebody else. So you're blaming that man over there while the government's got their hand in your back pocket stealing all your money. So it's an endless cycle. So for me, Kurt, the place that we start as human beings is with each other. You know,
I was just going to ask you that. How do we combat this? How do we deal
we
with this?
combat that by sitting down and walking in each other's shoes.
Okay.
We sit
Black,
down,
black and white, white and black.
black and white and black and black, white and white, because black people ain't a monolith. Within the black community, we have our own struggles. We have our own struggles of the way in which West Indian men are seen as opposed to African men.
That's right.
You know what I mean? In America, they have the struggle of African Americans as opposed to Africans and Haitians and West Indians who are coming in that look at African American men as lazy.
Yeah.
You haven't experienced systemic racism as they experienced. What you experienced in Africa and the Caribbean was colonialism, and that was a different type of racism. But the one thing that you both have in common is that in the African Americans have no share in the wealth of their land. The wealth that they built, they have no share in. Africans in the Caribbean and Africans in Africa, African Caribbeans and Africans in Africa have no share in the wealth that's created in our countries. No share. The wealth, the lion's share of that wealth is still controlled by Europe. So I say that, you know, and so black people aren't a monolith, but we sit down and deal with this by actually walking in each other's shoes. Let me try your shoes on. They might not fit, but at least I'll understand why you walk the way you walk. Yeah, your shoes might not fit me, but I'm going to understand the reason why you walk the way you walk. And so when people have an opinion on the way you walk, I can say, no. Stop already. You know, I used to teach that when I used to do How to Be a Player and with young people. And I always said the one thing that I learned being in South Africa was you don't know until you go. You don't know until you go. Meaning that you have to actually sit down with a person. You can't just read a book. You actually have to sit down with a person so that you can understand. And I believe that's where we start, because systemic racism isn't about evil white people oppressing black people and, you know what I mean, oppress black people hating white people. Systemic racism is about lie to humanity. That's what it's about. It's about lie to humanity. And that's where we have to start.
Pause there. I think maybe one more question for you. Do you need to put your lights on?
Nah. You know.
Cool. All right.
Oh, are you using this as a film as well?
Yeah, it's been filmed. Yeah.
Oh, all right then, sir. I'll put
You're good. You're good.
I like the light. You know, the rest of the sunlight that's coming in.
Yeah, and the camera. I wish we could pick it up the way that our eyes could, but you know.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you need an apology? Do we need an apology?
I'm only going to need an apology. And I'll put it this way. In work that I was doing in DEI through 2020 and the whole of 2021, I always used to say to the white people in the group that I facilitated, none of us were born when systemic racism was created. None of us are responsible for its creation. None of us are responsible for its construct. We weren't born. I said, but now that we understand what racism is, now that we understand what white privilege is, now that we understand what these, now that we understand what unconscious, what explicit biases and microaggressions.
Yeah.
Now that we understand the way systemic racism works, we have a part and we have responsibility to deconstruct it. We had no part in its construct, but we have part and responsibility for its deconstruction. So no, I don't need no apology from you. I need understanding and empathy and a commitment to change from you.
That's it.
But if you decide, having known that you don't give a monkeys and you're sticking with it, yeah, I need an apology from you. No, as a matter of fact, still don't need no apology. I just need you to get out of my way and don't come in and impede me. I can't do nothing about you. I don't need an apology. I don't need a conversation. I don't need an apology and I don't need a conversation. But no, black people ain't asking for an apology. We're asking for equity. We're asking for equity. We're asking for true equality. We're asking for true stories to be told. You know, we're asking, as Bob Marley said, we're asking you to free yourself from mental slavery. That's what we're asking. We're asking you to unplug from the matrix of systemic racism so that you can see my humanity and you can allow me to see your humanity. And so that the two of us can be truly two free individuals and not two lied to individuals. So no, I don't need no apology. I don't need no apology. Now, we've been talking for an hour and 40 seconds, and none of this conversation has been comfortable. But it's so necessary. It's so necessary. It's so necessary. You know, and my desire, my wish is that you sit as social workers. My desire is that you sit in the discomfort of that conversation, because it's going to be liberating for you, and not just you. It's going to be liberating for your children. It's going to be liberating for your families. It's going to be liberating for the people that you do life with and that you should be doing life with. That you should be doing life with, you know. Yeah, it's going to be liberating. And, you know, if you are a social worker, if you're a social worker dealing with young people that are coming from troubled backgrounds, the one thing that you cannot do is go in there, believe in a narrative about them that is an untrue narrative. That's the one thing you can't do. Because if you go in there, believe in a narrative that is an untrue narrative, every decision that you make is going to compound. It's going to compound. It's going to compound and gather interest on the outcome of their life, which is going to be negatively compounded with negative interest. So you have to sit. You have to sit in that space. You have to sit in that space. You owe it. You know, you owe it, number one, to them, and then you owe it to yourself. If you're not willing to do that, then you need to leave social work alone. Leave it alone. It ain't for you. It ain't for you. Leave social work alone. I mean it. Leave social work alone. Because social work places you at the heart of broken society. And broken society is found in the lives of men and women, the men and women that you deal with, the men and women that come across your desk, the reports, you know, the 10, 15 reports that you can't even give proper attention to. You know, you ain't got the time, you ain't got the space, you ain't got the energy to actually engage these people. So what you're going to do, you're going to deal with them from the narrative that you've been taught about them. You're going to cut corners. You're going to cut corners with their lives. You're going to cut corners with their futures. You're going to do that. Why? Because of unchecked and because of unexamined and because of unexplored narratives about who they are, and the unexplored narratives about who you are or who you think you are in relation to them. If you ain't willing to do that work, leave social work alone. Seriously, because the effect that you will have on them is generational. Because what you are seeing in them is the effect of generational, of generational repercussions. All you're going to do is just contribute to the constant generational dysfunction in their space. You know, I know we went off tangent then.
No, we need
as somebody who used to work in the home, and I know that there's a constant struggle between residential social workers and you all who work in the office. You know, there's that constant struggle. But as somebody who worked in the homes, somebody who's worked through the prison and through probation, I see it. Well, you see it. I'm talking to a professional. You see it. You don't need me to tell you it. Do the work. Do the work. Yeah. Don't go and talk to them. Definitely don't come and talk to me if you ain't done the work, or if you're not willing to do the work.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to do the work, don't come and talk to me, and don't go and talk to them. Do the work. Do the work. You're going to be a better human being. Forget about being a better social worker. You're going to be a better human being. And if you're a better human being, you're always going to end up being a better social worker. You're always going to end up being a better social worker. You're going to know how to use your resources. You're going to know how to use the leverage that being a social worker gives you in the court system, in the education system, in the PRUs, in all the places that you find yourself, through the prisons. You are going to know in the homes, in the refuges, you're going to know how to properly leverage the power that being a social worker gives you, as disempowered as you sometimes feel. But do the work. Do the work. Do the work. Be the one that does the work. As white social workers and as black social workers, do the work. And every shade in between. Because systemic racism is so rubbish that that's the only way I can say it. Black, white, and every shade in between. And every culture in between. That's fighting for proximity.
I like that. It is so rubbish.
To blackness, proximity away from whiteness, proximity away from blackness. Do the work. Do the work.
I like that. I like that. Do you know something? I'm
laughing now because I can feel the tears welling up inside.
Every show we do.
I'm serious. You're muted. You're muted.
Am I?
But I can feel the.
Can you hear me?
Oh no, you're not muted. I had you muted. Right. I can feel the tears welling up inside me.
I was going to say, you are of age, you are of experience, you are of education, and the tears are real because it's real life and it's coming out.
Yeah, man. My heart bleeds. My heart bleeds.
But let's not cry on this show. We'll save it.
No, we're not. We'll save that for This Is Marriage UK. Yeah.
Eddie, I just want to thank you. I did have another question for you, and I'm sitting there thinking, shall we do it? But
what's the question? No.
I'll tell you what. I'll get 5 minutes.
All right then.
5 minutes.
Seriously,
okay.
5.
Ready? Watch this. All right.
Yeah.
You're sitting across a table in a meeting of any kind, anywhere. It's a professional meeting. What are, when we're looking at the George Floyd situation, what we didn't look at was in the here and now, what are black folk going through around that table through the lens of being informed by our history with systemic racism, direct and indirect covert racism. What is an individual going through in their heart, mind when they're sitting around a table as a minority, so that we can understand when somebody wants to address the issue, what are some of the personal narratives that they're experiencing or have experienced. If you can give some insight into that. 2 minutes.
Well, let me speak for me. When I watched his murder, I felt the helplessness that systemic racism creates, the feeling of helplessness that it creates in black people. Serious, things were falling apart in my mind, just like in the background. I felt that I felt the weight of the idea that no one's coming to help, no one's coming to save you. When I saw Chauvin murdering him, and the other policemen kneeling on him, and the other policeman stopping the young girl from filming it. It was hopelessness. You know what I mean? And then I felt rage. I felt rage that I'm being made to feel that. I've been made to feel that in 2020. I've been made to feel that our lives are still in the so-called civilized West. Our lives are still worth nothing, where this man can like literally, you know, pose on a man's neck while he's murdering him and believe that he can get away with it.
Yeah.
You know, I felt the lack of agency. I felt the helplessness. I felt the rage. Um, and then at the same time, I felt, I felt, I felt the strength of the young girl who said, "There's nothing that I can do to help you here, except hold this camera here to let you know you ain't dying. You ain't dying alone. You know, I can't. I can fight them to come, but they're gonna murder me too. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stay here in this space, and you know, it's a type of pathetic pathos, you know, a type of pathetic poetry in being helpless, but then at the same time not being alone in your helplessness. She can't help you, but in retrospect, what she did in that moment and what she recorded in that moment actually just changed the world. It literally shook up the whole world, you know. And so I think what white people have to understand, and different black people are going to experience different things. So I'm just talking about how I felt. I think that what white people have to understand is in those moments, we don't want to discuss how we feel with you. We don't even want you in the room when we discuss how we feel. You need to just distance yourself from how we feel and ask us how we feel. Yeah. So that we can say, I don't want to talk about it right now, but I really appreciate the fact that you asked. But I can't talk about it right now. And what you need to do is you need to make space for your black colleagues, for your Asian colleagues, you know, if it's violence against women, for your female colleagues. You need to make space, you know, if it's your um, LBGTQI, you know, community. You need to make space for them to grieve apart from and separate from you so that they can comfort each other. You need to make space for black people to grieve, for us to grieve this, because it's grief. It's grief. I'm 57 years old, born in London. I have friends who committed suicide in police custody. You know, over the years, committed suicide. There was nothing suicidal about them. You know, what was suicidal was the police stations that they ended up in that had a history of extreme violence against black people in London. You know, and so different black people are going to experience it in different ways. And so, you know, I'm born in London and I've seen it. I've seen it. And so you need to make space for them to grieve and comfort each other, and then sit with them and let them walk you through it. Then sit with them and let them walk you through it so that you can understand. And so that you can understand what it is that you're looking at. And then think about the ways in which it doesn't work in such extreme ways, but it works in mirroring ways, the mirroring ways of you through unchecked bias may have your neck on somebody's, but through unexplored, through microaggressions may have your neck on your knee on someone's neck, through the way in which you hold the reins of their promotion, of their career, of what it is they're able to, how far it is they're able to go, how high it is they're able to rise, how many doors are open to them, ways in which you may actually have your neck or knee on the neck, or you may not have your knee on the neck, but the person who's got the knee on the neck, and you're holding the body. You're holding the body in other ways, through attitudes and through perceptions and through conversations and through banter, you know what I mean? That, subtly discredits or subtly, has concerns. I kind of have concerns. So, yeah. If you don't stop this thing, me, I'm going to go on, man. So.
Okay, look, yeah, as you guys could tell, Eddie and I have history, but
yeah, man. Yeah,
I know the greatest people around. That's where a lot of my wealth is, Ed. So, I'm sure we can say that you do provide workshops in this area of support. So if any institution is brave enough to tackle this problem, I just want to say that this issue around diversity, racism, discrimination, prejudice, I can say that although a lot of institutions, local authorities have addressed it, they haven't all addressed it well and well enough. And this is in August 2022, my local authority that I work for is still addressing it. And I've attended a session that was very fruitful because everybody was given the space to speak. And that's a way to do it.
Your local authority?
I can't say. Oh, well. Yeah, but it's not in London, which is interesting.
Yeah.
It's not in London. I could say, but I don't want people
down
from my workplace, right?
Down. Yeah.
But it's south, and
cut them some slack.
Yeah, no, but they were brilliant. They were brilliant, and things don't have to be perfect. You know that, Ed. We don't need someone to hit the bullseye. We just need someone to lay the sheets down, and then we'll work it out from there. And
we have to approach this the way I approach dealing with the stuff that's come down through my family tree. There's stuff that's come down through my family tree, and we talk about generational curses. There's stuff that's come down through the generations. I know I can't catch everything, but what each generation gets the opportunity to do, I look at the major ones and say, all right, there's 10 of them. These 3, and I know in my family, there's maybe about 5, 6. I know that 5, 6 major ones, but for me, I got my hands on 2 of them. And I know that behavior ends with me in my generation. I've got agency there. And so you may think, ain't no one asking you to solve every problem. No. What we're asking you to do is look at the main ones that truly affect the way we're able to effectively do this work of social work, effectively effect change in the lives of the communities and the homes and the individuals that we go to, because that effect will exponentially be felt through that individual, through those families, through those communities, through the country. That's how you boil it all the way down, and then it comes all the way back out again. So ain't no one looking for perfection from this, but we're looking for its intentionality.
It was dealt with well, and it's been dealt with well. And there's a part 2, and there's a part 3 coming, this is what I'm saying. Yeah, so I could go. We would never stop on this topic, but I want to thank you, Eddie.
Man, it's a pleasure.
You will be available to teach where necessary, and that's where we aim to do.
And I'm doing a lot of work now around the idea of racism and resilience, and what racism actually does to resilience, and how it so much affects our resilience. especially within the work that we do as social workers. As you know, I work with people through the education, and then I work with leaders and through care, through the care system, through nursing, and so I see the effect on of resilience on them and the lack of resilience, and then I see how it actually works as well, how racism affects that on both sides. So, yeah.
So listen,
Holler when you need me.
well, of course. You know, this is part 10. This is what we do. Guys, thank you for joining the show. For Eddie, it's bedtime. For me, it's the morning.
Hey, bro, it's 6 o'clock, man. 6 o'clock in the evening. I know I'm 57, but slow down. You know what I mean? Easy, Tiger.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
I know you're saying I'm an uncle, but I ain't that old. I ain't that uncle. You know, I ain't a grand uncle.
For Eddie, let me rephrase that. I don't want to make you feel more than you know, but it's night. It's early evening for Eddie. Well, you know, we're like about 8, 9, 10 hours apart, 12 hours or something like that. What are we? 11 hours, right? It was about 11 hours.
What time is it now? It's 9 in the morning where you are now.
Yep, bang on.
Yeah.
Bang on. Yeah, so you know, we're all making sacrifices here to make this show happen. Please share, please subscribe. Remember, if you want to get in contact with me, it's the original. What am I talking about? Sorry, it's the social work race at gmail.com. Get me on LinkedIn as a social work race and on TikTok, which we are keeping warm and working on. Eddie, where can we find you?
You can find me as Eddie Hypolite just across social media. Or you can find me at my my website, which is EYR. My company is Empowering Your Resilience Limited. EYRLTD.com. EYRlimited.com. You can find me there. Or as I said, on social media, you can find me just as Eddie Hypolite. I don't have any other name. That's the name my mother gave me. So I'll just use that one. It works.
You know? That's the one that works for us as well, man. Thank you all. Have a good day and look after yourselves. Take care.